The Rag Man. This story is associated with a family in Padua, Italy. They had only just moved into the quiet, historic neighborhood on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where fog curled through the cobbled streets and the faint smell of rain never seemed to leave. The family consisted of the husband, John, his wife Mary, and their 2 children, Chris, aged 8, and Lila, aged 6. For the first few weeks, life was good. The neighbors were polite, the children settled into school, and the old house, though drafty and full of creaks, felt charming in its own way. That is, until the week of November 17th, 2024. Day 1, the departure. 3 days before the 17th, John received an urgent call to attend a business meeting in Venice. Mary, though reluctant, reassured him she could handle the children on her own for a week. He kissed them all goodbye that morning, promising to be home by the weekend. The first day passed uneventfully. The children were obedient. Mary even took them to a nearby cafe for pastries. But on the second night, it began. Day 2, the first sound. Mary was reading in bed when she heard it, a soft scraping noise above her room. It was faint at first, almost like the shifting of old wood. But then it grew louder, like someone was dragging something heavy across the attic floor. Mary gathered her courage, climbed the narrow staircase, and opened the attic door. It was empty. The air was bitter cold. And in the corner, she thought she saw a faint outline of something stitched into the dust, like black thread forming a crude circle. Shaking it off as her imagination, she went back to bed. Day 3, the doll. The next morning, she found Chris crying in the hallway, clutching an old cloth doll no one had ever seen before. Its fabric was yellowed, its button eyes dull, and its stitched smile crooked. But most disturbing, its hair was real. "Where did you get that?" Mary asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Chris wiped his tears. "I didn't make him. He gave it to me." "Who, Chris?" He looked at her, wide-eyed, and whispered, "The Rag Man." That night, Mary tried to throw the doll away, but in the morning it was back, sitting at the foot of her bed, its head cocked slightly, as if watching her sleep. Day 4, Lila. On the night of the 16th, Mary awoke to a scream. "Mom!" She ran to Lila's room and froze. Her daughter was levitating above the bed, her hair stretched upward, as though invisible hands were pulling at each strand. Mary screamed and tried to grab her daughter's legs, but they were cold as ice, and something tugged back. Then, just as suddenly, Lila was dropped to the bed, unconscious. Mary sat there trembling, tears running down her cheeks, whispering prayers she barely remembered. The discovery. After putting the children to bed, Mary went downstairs and began rifling through every drawer, desperate for answers. In the bottom of a dusty kitchen cabinet, she found an old deed to the house and a name. Giovanni di Rossi. Died November 17, 1924. Her heart stopped. She rushed to her laptop and searched. There it was, an old newspaper clipping. Local tailor hanged for the murder and mutilation of 4 children. Bodies found sewn into sacks. Neighbors say he swore vengeance on all who lived in his home on the anniversary of his death. That was tomorrow. Day 5, the Walkers. With shaking hands, Mary called the only people she thought might believe her, Daniel and Claire Walker, a married paranormal investigation team from America's she'd seen in a documentary. By evening, they arrived, 2 figures dressed in black coats, carrying strange devices and old tomes. Claire stood in the doorway for a long moment before speaking. "It's strong here," she murmured. Daniel's face darkened as he glanced at the attic. "It waited 100 years," he said. "Tonight, it finishes its work. The ritual. They worked quickly, setting up candles in the children's room, drawing protective circles of salt around the beds. Daniel placed a crucifix above the attic door and began chanting softly. Suddenly, Chris began crying, the doll in his arms twisting and writhing like a living thing. Black thread slithered out of it, coiling around Mary's wrists, pulling her upward toward the attic door. 100 years, a voice rasped from above. Time to finish my work. Mary screamed as the invisible threads cut into her skin, hoisting her higher. The attic door swung open violently, and the scraping noise became deafening, like the sound of 1,000 needles scratching wood. Now! Claire shouted, splashing holy water on the doll. It screamed, a high, inhuman wail that shook the house. The black threads burst into flames, snapping one by one as Mary fell into Daniel's arms. Aftermath. The house was quiet. The doll lay in ashes. The stitching on the walls faded into dust. Mary clutched her children, sobbing in relief as Daniel and Claire packed up their tools. At the door, Claire turned back to her and said quietly, "It's over. For now." But his patient. The rag man always waits for his next stitch. Mary didn't dare ask what she meant. Epilogue. Outside, in the fog that rolled down the empty street, a tall, thin figure stood watching the house. Its head tilted to one side, its face obscured by shadow. In one hand, it held a long, gleaming needle. In the other, a spool of black thread, slowly unwinding. And faintly, from the attic window, came the sound of fabric tearing, and the whisper of stitches being sewn. Just one or more.